All right, you hayseeds, it's a stick up. Everybody freeze. Everybody down on the ground.
Well, which is it, young feller? You want I should freeze or get down on the ground? Mean to say, if I freeze, I can't rightly drop. And if I drop, I'm going to be in motion. You see?
Shut up!
Okay, then.
Extras and epilogue. Open your ears. Lights, cameras, action. Movies and reviews that you might not know. What happens to your favorite characters? Let's get on with the show.
A childless couple, an ex-con and an ex-cop, decide to help themselves to one of another family's quintuplets, complicating their lives more than they anticipated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the theater. It is now open once again. This is Extras and Epilogues. My name is Shannon Young. The curtains have been drawn back. We are back. I want to apologize first off for not having our show after Christmas like we said we would. We were going to have our big 2025 preview. I can go ahead and fix that up for you right now. We're closing the podcast down in May or April. It was May.
It's supposedly no. It would be March, isn't it? It's not May.
March. Yeah, because April 1st was going to be the next show. Yeah, so
like March 27th or something like that.
Yeah, so there's your 2025 preview. It's ending. Keep that. Tuck that away in your pocket. We also this show is a day late. I apologize for that too. It's a couple of us weren't feeling well. It's been kind of a rough week. Physically for us. So that with that out of the way, I want to give a shout out to tonight's sponsor, Taylor, the wine, who is providing me with glass after glass of delicious red wine. It's a port, Hunter.
Is Taylor the wine anything like Raising the Witch the movie?
Or Josh? God. I'm stalling because I don't.
Well, it's a wine for Josh.
This is not a wine for Taylor. This is just the Taylor wine. That is one of the biggest tumblers I think I've ever.
That thing's huge.
That thing's huge, Zach. Not to spoil too much.
He also appears to have made a mess that he's now fixing.
Yes.
There was a mess, and now there it is. He's good. Confirmation. We're good.
Tonight we're reviewing. Yeah, that's right. Raising Arizona. And to talk about Raising Arizona, because this is one of Hunter's favorite films, not to spoil anything, you'll probably see where this is going. But with me is Hunter Hendricks, but you can just call him
instead of Hi.
Yeah.
Shannon, when there was no meat, we ate fowl. And when there was no fowl, we ate crawdad. When there was no crawdad, we ate sand.
You ate what?
We ate sand.
And lastly, joining us once again, Mr. Zach Kurgis, who is directing Traffic.
Repeat offender.
Recidivism.
Turn to the right.
Are you really sorry this time, sir?
Don't forget his bouquet head.
Well, all right.
Oh, God.
So, Hunter had talked me into watching this last year.
Yeah, about a year ago.
And I did watch most of it. So, when Hunter would ask me, like, hey, do you like it? I was like, oh, yeah, I liked it. It was mostly true, the things I saw. Well, now I've officially watched all of it. I sat down right before the show. Lindsay and I watched it together. And I can give a full-on, honest review. This was on YouTube. It would be tagged as my honest review of Raising Arizona. Which, not to get off of the tangent real quick, but, like, that's so annoying. YouTubers, stop putting that.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Why would you give anything but your honest review?
To me.
Especially on a movie that has been out for 30 years. Like, were you getting paid? Is it special content there?
Hunter and I were both in the wrestling business for a while. And to be fair, Zach kind of was too, because he was he was in the
crowd control.
Yeah. One thing that I hate in professional wrestling, and I think Hunter would agree with me, is WCW, for there towards the end, would always talk about how everything else is fake, but this is real. Oh, this isn't in the script, stuff like that. It creates this sense of, well, why do I care when you tell me that? Because then it feels like everything else is pointless. Well, that's how I feel about this is my honest review. So the rest of your reviews aren't honest? Like, what are you talking about, man? Every review we do on this show, every review we do on this show is honest. This is how we really feel about the films, which is why tonight's going to be so interesting. Because
I'm so curious. This is the first time that I've ever felt like I might be us against the world. Like,
this is how I felt a couple of times. Now, before we start, I want to lay some ground rules down, and there's one ground rule. And that's we promise now not to mention Gremlins during the rest of the show.
That's going to be harder for you than anyone.
There will be no comparisons to Gremlins. There will be no mention of Gremlins. There will be no showing off Gremlin pillows. Yeah, I'm taking Gremlins off the table. We're here to
very specific rule.
We're here to talk about Raising Arizona. We got a little bit of fan feedback recently. You guys talk a lot about Gremlins on the show. Yes, I do. Okay, with that said, let's get to the stats. Released on March 13th, 1987, directed and written by the Coen brothers. Is Ethan and Joel? Am I right on that?
Yes, Joel. I think technically Joel is the director.
Yeah,
and then Ethan is usually listed as a producer, and then a lot of times they co-write the scripts themselves.
You may remember them from other films such as Fargo, The Big Lebowski, and legit one of my favorites and my mom's favorite, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And
yes, which I think is probably the most of their movies that's like this one.
Yes.
Like, I think if you like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, you're more likely to like this movie because it has a lot of similar comparisons. It also has some crossover cast. John Goodman, of course, is in both movies. But this was not their first movie. Their very first movie is called Blood Simple.
I remember that one.
I've never seen it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. It's very serious. It's very kind of neo-noir, very detective-like. Yeah. And in the wake of that, they wanted to make something that was a little more lighthearted. This is not a totally lighthearted movie, but it's definitely a comedy. It's written as a comedy. It's meant to be funny. But I think if you've ever seen a Coen Brothers movie and it's not this one, you will get the vibe immediately.
Yes,
Raising Arizona has that vibe of extremely over-the-top characters, but a very lived-in sort of world. It's realistic without being completely real. It just has a lot of that same kind of feel to it.
Yeah, and no little characters get little weapons at any point. Yeah, I know. No, withdrawn. You're right. Withdrawn. Sorry. While Hunter steps away here for a second, I was going to say, I'm glad he said that because I 100% agree. I love Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That's one of my favorite movies. It might even be in my top 5.
Mine too.
Yeah, and
I really enjoy that movie.
I did get a lot of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou vibes in this because it has that same kind of like subtle humor. He said it was a comedy, and it is a comedy. I didn't find myself laughing at any of it, but it's not because I didn't think it was funny. It's just a very subtle comedy, like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was. The characters are all kind of whimsical, and I was gonna say, if you ever said Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was like a Coen Brothers film, this is also a Coen Brothers film. Like, it feels very, very similar, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing because I genuinely I didn't think I would love Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and I can't wait for us to review it one day. But it's such an incredible movie. Let's see how this one stacks up to it.
I also really like The Big Lebowski. I didn't know they did that. And so I could see some of the same like camera angles and the way that they film is in The Big Lebowski. Now that, that connection's made, I can actually see it.
Yeah. They have a style. Certain directors have a style. Certain writers have a style. You see it with Michael Bay. You can always see a Michael Bay film and go, that's a Michael Bay film. Or Zack Snyder. Tarantino. Yeah. They all have their style, and so are the Coens, and I like the Coen brothers style. It's very very demure, very whatever the rest of that saying is. Starring Nicolas Cage, because it is a Cagey Christmas. We have 2 more shows to pay homage to Nick Cage. Also starring Holly Hunter, who crushed that. I've always liked Holly Hunter, but once I saw her in this movie a year ago, and then a couple of weeks ago when we were going to review this movie earlier, I realized how big of a crush I had on Holly Hunter. She's so adorable in this film, and she's a great actress. I love her. John Goodman, who's just one of the best ever, just top tier. John Goodman. William Forsythe, I'm a big fan of. I've always been a big fan of William Forsythe. I think he should get more films. And then this isn't on the list. Frances McDormand is in the film, and Emmett Walsh, who I'm a big fan of, plays a small cameo part, but I just wanted to mention him. And Tex Cobb. Yeah, Zach, what's up?
So Holly Hunter is actually in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou as well.
Oh yeah, she's Clooney's wife, isn't she?
Yeah, she's Penny.
Yep, I knew it.
She's also Helen Parr, which is Elastigirl, for the people that know about The Incredibles.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I completely forgot about that because
and now that I can hear it.
Yeah,
it all makes sense now.
It's not just a character. She really does kind of have that southern drawl when she talks, you know? It's got a runtime of 94 minutes. It's right around what Hunter and I like to call the sweet spot. Hour and a half is the best place to be. Budget versus box office, $5 million budget versus $29 million box office. So not a mega hit, but it was successful. It did make money, and in Hollywood, that's important, especially because this is, I think this was the Coen brothers' second film. I think Hunter mentioned that earlier. So to have your second film do well is pretty good. Critical reception, it's loved. 90% critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's a 7.8 out of 10. 69 out of 100 on Metacritic, which is generally favorable. A cinema score of B on an A to F scale, and a little shocked by this, and I'm going to wait for Hunter to come back before we dig anything else, because I know he's got something to say. 1.5 out of 4 stars from Roger Ebert, who said, here's a movie that stretches out every moment for more than it's worth until even the moments of inspiration seem forced. Now, his partner, Gene Siskel, gave it a thumbs up on the show and said it was as good as it is funny. And I actually watched that show. I remember this show. I'm not kidding. I remember this show because they disagreed on this movie heavily, and they brought up Blood Simple. You can find most of Siskel and Ebert, by the way, on YouTube. If you look them up, you can watch their old episodes. Highly worth watching if you want to see how professionals do it, as opposed to this bunch of yahoos that we get on the show here. Zach, I feel like you're going to lean more towards Roger Ebert than Gene Siskel on this one.
Yeah, it's a movie. Like, it's not a bad movie, and I'm just not. It's not made for me.
Yeah,
this isn't made for me. Like, I love the way that they filmed it. I love the cinematography, like all that stuff. Like, that stuff's great. But the story for me was just not there, and I chuckled a few times, but
not your kind of
film.
I would
rather watch. Yeah, I'd rather watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou.
Oh, I'm so glad you didn't say I'd rather watch Gremlins. That's what I was worried you were going to say. And we agreed that we wouldn't talk about it. We can't talk about
it. We agreed to it, so I
so you can't do it.
In DNA. Yeah, I can't do it.
I'm gonna land. I'm giving away my review here, but I land somewhere in between Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel on this. I don't think it's nearly as bad as Ebert said, but I don't think it's as good as maybe Gene Siskel thinks it is. It's really hard to gauge a thumbs up when it's 1 up, 1 down. That's why we have a 5-point system on this show. I really enjoyed it. It's like a modern day folk tale. It's very folksy. The characters are all very likable. Except Tex Cobb's character, Leonard Smalls, who is such a wild character, like seeming like he's out of a different movie, honestly. But the main characters, H.I. and Ed, are both very realistic and very well played. And I said before, it's a very subtle comedy. There's not a lot of in-your-face jokes. There's not a lot of like extreme humor, which I actually really appreciate, because I don't generally, unless it's like Mel Brooks and someone that can do it properly, I don't care for like in-your-face extreme humor. I used to be a fan of Jim Carrey. I am not any longer. I don't hate the man, but his style of humor just really isn't for me. This is honestly my favorite kind of humor. Not to give too much away again, but just that really, it's like Election. It's that subtle humor. It's not in your face. It's not over the top. It's not Melissa McCarthy. I like Melissa McCarthy, but it's not Melissa McCarthy humor, Hunter.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Yes.
So a couple things I'll double back to because I was kind of listening. I know there were things you were going to bring up. The Ebert score, obviously.
Yes.
I could not find a Siskel like star rating, so I had to go with his bit from the show, as you mentioned. He gave it a single thumb up.
I remember that episode. Yeah. I really do.
The Ebert score, I mean, look, man, this is one of the few times, and I've said this a couple times, where I just don't agree. I just don't agree with him. Yeah. I don't think that it has a perfect runtime, right? 94 minutes, sweet spot for a comedy. Even though it's not strictly a comedy, it has some dramatic elements to it. No part of me ever thought that any of these scenes went on too long. I don't understand that criticism at all. That didn't make any sense to me. And I very rarely say that about Roger Ebert. There have been times I've disagreed, but I can see where he's coming from. Yeah. I don't know if maybe this, like Zach, is just not his kind of film. Although, without Roger Ebert, I never really felt like anything wasn't his kind of film.
Batman.
But yeah, I don't know. Well,
so
true.
I want to say this now, and I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want anybody to have the worst day of their lives.
Worst day of their life.
But for the record, I gave a thumb up to Con Air, right? And I liked Con Air, and I still like Con Air. Yeah. This Nick Cage is so much better at being sentimental than the forced sentimental feeling in Con Air.
This is my favorite Nick Cage. This is my favorite Nick Cage movie. This is my favorite version of him. I think he strikes a really good balance between all things. He feels like a real person, even though he's kind of a caricature.
This is the only movie, he's silly, but other than Leaving Las Vegas, this is the only movie where Nick Cage feels like a real person and not a character.
Yeah. And again, obviously it's stylized. It's over the top. He's constantly getting picked up for petty theft. Some of his stuff is he gets in the signature scream, right? When the chair gets knocked over, he gets to lay there screaming. And it's not the only time he does that, but like the juxtaposition between ridiculous, just fast talking, trying to get himself out of a situation high. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie when he slugs Glenn, and that low shot from Glenn's perspective on the desert floor, basically, of him saying, "Keep your damn hands off my wife." Like, it's so good. It's so good.
It was the end that put it over for me. And that's when I realized that. Yeah. So, not to go back to Con Air, because again, I liked Con Air, but Con Air was at its best when it was kind of an action comedy type thing. The whole beginning, where he's talking to his kid, "I hope you go to kindergarten today," and all that stuff. It's terrible. It's bad.
It's awful.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the end of this film, when he's talking about his dream sequence, which I knew was going to happen, but I've never seen that part. I thought it was going to be cringier than it was. And I thought, Nick Cage, when he's a great actor, first off, Nick Cage is a great actor. You might not think that sometimes because some of his roles are so ridiculous. And like Face Off. Face Off is probably my favorite Nick Cage movie. It's terrible in ways, and it's completely ridiculous, but like that's how I always knew Nick Cage, was as the kind of over the top insane guy. But to see him in this film where he feels really, we brought this word up on I think Christmas Story, really earnest, and you can kind of tell what a great actor he is. He's got an incredible range. That end dream sequence made me go, see, this is kind of what I wish Con Air, he didn't have to be so over the top with the accent and all that shit. He could have been a much more realistic person.
Well, one of the things I love about High is that he's never written as stupid. The things he does are illogical, right? Trying to knock over a convenience store and constantly getting caught. But people, the same company. I don't think it's the same way. It's always a shortstop, is what it's called. Yeah. I don't know that it's the same one every single time. But at the same time, I mean, not to justify it too much, but like, people have personality flaws. People are obsessive compulsive about things. People have things that draw them to them, even though it's a bad idea, and they do it anyway.
I shouldn't have said his full name.
But he's not. High isn't written as unintelligent. In fact, he is rather intelligent given the opportunity to do so, and especially the way that he speaks. And that's one of the things I really like about him as a character, is that, again, he feels like most people know that person who is more eloquent than they seem to be, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're smart, right? They don't make good decisions.
Dude, this character reminds me so much of Jeff. I know I joked about it a second ago, but like if Jeff was in the late 80s and he was less of a thug and more of, just in this area, this would be him, because Jeff was always incredibly charismatic, smarter than he lets on, but he did stupid things. He did stupid things, and it made you go, why would you do that? You don't have to do that. I also wanted to... God damn it, I lost it now. I had a great thing I wanted to mention before, and now it's gone. Son of a bitch. Oh, my favorite part of the movie. No, my favorite part of the movie. I remember now. It's because it involves the shortstop. When he goes to get diapers and he robs it, and she sees him and she just goes, son of a bitch, you son of a bitch. I love that part so much.
Hurry up now, I'm in Dutch with the wife. I don't know if you noticed, but to draw it back to the ending that you talked about a minute ago, the song, that instrumental song, that kind of like bubbly, ethereal kind of dream sequence song that plays, it's the exact same song that Ed was singing to Nathan Jr. when the morning that High wakes up after having the dream about Smalls, she's walking around carrying the baby singing a song. It's the same song. And it's this very kind of like condemned man realizing that he's his life has passed him by sort of thing. I don't know. It's just a good little tie. It's a Coen Brothers move, and it once you know what to look for and listen for, it's coming.
Well, like I said, it's very folksy. It feels very folksy. It shares such a DNA with Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And a lot of the Coen Brothers films kind of feel similar in that sense that it's big on characters. It's very memorable. The characters are very memorable. Fargo, Big Lebowski, which you have written on there. Yeah. But this one is the only one that feels as folksy as Oh Brother Where Art Thou did, where you would almost bet this was based on an old story that they've kind of updated. Like with the Odyssey, with the Oh Brother Where Art Thou, but it's not. And this was the Coen's second film, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes. Yep. After Blood Simple, this was the first. This was the first big studio movie they made, if I remember correctly.
And this was Nicolas Cage's. This wasn't his first film. I'm looking at his filmography right now, and of course we talked about.
I think it was his first starring role.
I think it was his first starring role. He was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but it was just basically a cameo. He was in The Outsiders, but it was a cameo. He was uncredited. He was in Valley Girl.
No. What's Valley, that? He's one of the main in Valley Girl.
I've never seen Valley Girl, so I'm glad you.
So it's among his first roles.
He's like a punk rock kind of kid.
Oh Lord,
like way different. Yeah, way different than like what we know punk rock is. And then he this Valley Girl shows up, and then he's all about like that's who I want to be with.
Oh, and
I'm seeing.
I don't know how big a deal he is in Peggy Sue Got Married, but that was also a pretty big movie, as I recall. I've never seen it, so I don't know who this character is.
Right.
It does look like he got top billing in it. So this wasn't his first movie, but it was in a handful of firsts.
To me, it was the one that kind of put him on the map. I'm sure maybe some of the other ones did, but Raising Arizona is the one. When people talk about Nick Cage and his beginnings, that's the one I always go back to. And he's had a wonderful career. Pretty much almost everybody in this movie that had a decent part had a great career. Yeah. Maybe not. I say Tex Cobb, maybe not, but what do you do with a guy like that?
It was kind of stunt casting anyway. Yeah, I don't think Tex Cobb was really out to be an actor. My understanding is he was a little bit difficult to work with.
Yes.
And the best thing they got out of him was the speech. No, not necessarily the speech, but the back and forth that he has with Nathan in the office when he's basically first saying, I'm going to find your kid one way or another. You can either pay me to get him back what he's worth, or I'll get the correct price for him somewhere else. Which really, that's his only extended scene. I mean, anything beyond that are little blips of him showing up and basically showing how badass he is, and then the fight scene at the end. And past that, you don't really get a lot out of it.
Choking on Taylor here. Yeah, Zach mentioned it to me before. He said, I find it a little odd. Okay, I'm not going to mention the movie we said we're not going to mention, but...
This will be the third time you've done that.
Well, no, it's not, because I'm not going to mention it. But there may be...
You actually called it by name earlier when I was not here, but go ahead.
There's a character with a little weapon. I won't bring it up anymore. But Zach said it's odd. He thought that was odd. But there's a guy that just shows up, and I agree with him to an extent. Because it is kind of weird, and you're like, well, why are they all so cool with this? He shows up at that one part with the cops are all there on his motorcycle with his fucking shotguns, hanging on his back, and nobody says a thing. They don't even bat an eyelash. They're just like, okay, there's Leonard.
The cops are inept in this movie,
very
and
much
we know
so.
This from the get-go. First of all, these guys tunneled out of prison. No one noticed.
Yeah,
not clear how any of that shit happened.
Which was great.
The whole chase sequence surrounding the Huggies. Those cops are inept. The guy's literally hanging out of the cop car, firing indiscriminately.
He was just shooting at houses.
Right. At a certain point, you have to accept the Looney Tunes.
Yes. And then they just go back in the hole. They're just like,
yes. Yeah. And that's, again, the Coen brothers have a certain Looney Tunes-ness to everything that they do. Yes. And that's one of them. That's one of those things. They go back. I actually pointed that out yesterday, and it never dawned on me. The hole never gets filled.
Nope.
I know they were only gone for like a week or whatever, but the hole never gets filled, and they just hopped back down in and went back in.
They don't even block it off. They don't have people watching it. Nothing.
I love the fact that
the whole interview sequence.
It's not that they're forced to do it. They're not forced to do it. They make the conscious decision of, maybe this isn't working out.
Well, that's why they left in the first place, right?
Yeah.
They realized that prison no longer had anything to offer them, and they decided to leave. I forgot the cops were also inept in the Nathan interview when they, the whole
the jammies.
That's a $500 camel's hair coat. Yeah, the jammies. I don't know. They got Yodas and shit on them.
What color were the jammies?
Also, they're all wrong because if you remember, none of the kids were wearing pajamas.
No,
they all had
diapers
on, and that was it. Yeah, I think the point is just to show it's that subtle level of anyone in a position of power is a moron.
Yeah,
and that's usually a Coen brothers move, right?
Right.
People who have power don't deserve it.
And if I were going to talk about another film that I'm not going to mention, I would say it's also important to accept the Looney Tunes-ness of it.
It's true.
Look, sometimes,
sometimes maybe,
sometimes movies just. It's a movie, like legitimately.
Sometimes they defy the laws of physics, and that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'll deal with it.
Whether it's this film or other unnamed films that I'm not going to talk about, sometimes you just have to go, look, it's a movie, and sometimes you just enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, yes, dude, you could pick apart almost every movie that's existed. I could pick apart almost every, and we have sometimes on this show, but it gets to a point where you just kind of have to go, hey, look, it's a movie. Just move on, enjoy it, and move on.
Did you love the Evil Dead reference? The sweeping camera that goes up into the bedroom where the baby's been taken?
Yes, I noticed that.
That was a direct Sam Raimi reference. He was a big influence on the Coen brothers when they were up and coming, doing their thing.
It's wild.
Something I didn't realize was a reference until years later, obviously.
There are some things that when you see it, you automatically see the DNA for it. Like if you had never, if we weren't doing this show, and I watched this film after watching Oh Brother Where Art Thou, I would have known it's a Coen Brothers film. Like you can see DNA on stuff. I mentioned it to Zach when you were gone. You can always tell a Zack Snyder film. You can always tell a Quentin Tarantino film, like Zach said. You can always tell a Coen Brothers film. And I think, I think I asked the other day, is there a director that has never had a big miss? We were talking about this in the chat, and I don't know if anyone mentioned the Coens, but like you could very much put the Coens in that category. I think even more so than Tarantino, because I don't think there's ever been a Coen Brothers film that has been bad.
I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think. There are movies I didn't care for, but that's not the same thing. As I recall, the Hudsucker Proxy didn't do very well. So there's that.
God, with Tim Robbins and that's a weird one. That's a weird one.
Yeah, that and Barton Fink, which was right before that. Neither one of those did particularly well, if I remember correctly.
I have never seen Barton Fink. The only thing I can even think about is the Simpsons joke where they are going to go see an R-rated film and they start going Barton Fink, Barton Fink.
Yeah, I wasn't a particularly big fan of Burn After Reading. I never quite understood why everyone was super into that. I maybe need to give it another shot. I don't know.
True Grit was okay.
Yeah, you can put them on the list. I like True Grit quite a bit. I think I like True Grit more than others for whatever reason.
So I'm glad you brought up their films, because there was one other film that I think if you ever look into I mentioned the DNA earlier, the DNA of a film like this and Oh Brother Where Art Thou, they also did The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which shares a lot of that feeling. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But anyway,
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, we're talking about a lot of films that aren't this film. Hunter, this is one of your favorite films, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit on the show before. But I would like to know for the audience as a whole, the history of you in this film and why you love it so much.
Yeah, so I've told this story at length several times on this show specifically, so I won't get into all the details. But there was a brief time so I was born in '85. In the mid '90s, I was 10, 12, and there was a brief time around that time where my parents were separated. When that was the case, I was with my dad on the weekends. My dad decided to cut the cable because he didn't really watch a lot of TV. So basically, I just kind of had to make do. It didn't make sense to have cable when I was only going to be there a couple days a week. Was all well and good when the weather was nice. And I could go outside and do stuff. When it wasn't, you kind of had to fall back on what you had. Fortunately, video games saved me a lot of those times. But there were also times where I just kind of wanted to sit and watch a movie. I like to do that while I'm playing with Legos or whatever. My dad didn't have a lot of kids selections in terms of films, which most of the time wasn't a big deal because I had things like Ghostbusters and Jurassic Park and Star Wars to fall back on. But this is also when I started watching movies like Stripes. And Raising Arizona was among those movies. This is one of my dad's favorite movies. This is one of the first movies that we ever bonded over outside of holiday films like Christmas Vacation. Right. I watched it a lot with him. It also, I think, I don't like to say that it shaped my sense of comedy. I think a lot of other things did that first. Watching David Letterman, you and I have talked about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Times. Yeah.
But I do think this is one of those movies that I started quoting before anything else because my dad and I just love to watch it together. And it has so many quotable moments and so many funny lines and bits that you can kind of go back to. This is one of the few movies that I never gave up for any significant period of time. There was definitely a time where I wasn't watching Ghostbusters every single year. There was definitely a time where Jurassic Park kind of fell to the wayside. I wasn't quite ready for the nostalgia trip. But this movie, pretty much, it was a guarantee. I was watching it once or twice a year. And a lot of times it was just because I'd be, back from college at home for a little bit, watch it with my dad. I showed it to Sarah not long after we first got together and picked up a DVD as soon as it was available. It just... I don't know. It's one of the few movies outside of genre films like, your Back to the Futures, your Star Wars, Ghostbusters, etc., that makes that list of mine of things that I always want to go back to. Tombstone is another one. We talked about it around this time last year.
Absolutely.
But when it goes to comedies, for the longest time, I said Superbad was one of my favorite comedies, and that is true. But at the same time, Superbad I don't think holds up as well as this movie. This movie doesn't quite rely as much on the you had to be there time frame of it because this one is so fantastical and kind of silly and over the top in a lot of ways while still being grounded as well. So this is a movie that it's very tough for me to be objective about it because I do have a sentimental attachment to it.
Sure. No,
I will say that up front.
You're talking to a guy that loves a movie that we're not going to talk about. I get it. Believe me. I also want to say this. The 80s, and I stand by this, I think the 80s was the best era for decade for films. This is the kind of comedy you don't see anymore. You really don't. No. It's like Ghostbusters. It's like those films where it's funny, but it doesn't have to try to be funny. You know what I mean?
Right, and it's kind of weirdly funny, and it's not written for a specific audience. I hate when people throw around the phrase, "Oh, that would never get made today," because usually what that means is, it has racist. Offensive fucking humor, right? Stuff that isn't really funny outside the context of let's make fun of marginalized people. Yeah. When the reality is, this is the kind of movie that would never get made today. Right. Or at the very least, it would not get a big theatrical release. It would not get a bunch of attention. This would have been a Sundance darling. Look, it would have been an indie film that would have shown up at festivals and people would have liked it, but you would never have seen it on a large scale. This
was not built, and I know you enjoy the app, but this was not built for the TikTok generation. This movie is not built for those guys. No. I think this movie is a throwback, obviously, and it's a film from a simpler time where comedy could be natural and not and not forced. I don't know the last time I saw a comedy that actually made me laugh. And again, this film, it's not like I was falling over my seat laughing. I didn't laugh out loud at any of it, but it's not because I didn't think it was funny. It's because I have no emotions. I thought a lot of it was very entertaining and funny, but it's because we are fair and balanced on this show, just like Fox News. Let's turn it over to Zach Kurgis and see what his thoughts. Oh my God! All right, you guys can't see this at home, but the slow turn Zach gave when I said that was worth the price of admission alone.
Yeah, I want a gif of that. I want to be able to go back and revisit that appearance.
Zach, you said earlier, and safe space, that this was not your kind of film, right?
Sure. It is not my kind of film.
That's how I felt with A Christmas Story, and I said that specifically on A Christmas Story, was that I saw how good it was, but it's not my kind of movie,
I mean, I appreciate it as a film. Like, I can see why people enjoy it. Maybe this is one of those that, like, with Hunter, with a movie that we won't mention apparently, I could, if I saw this like as a younger kid, and like if this was something that me and my mom watched, then I could see me liking it. But I don't know. It wasn't my cup of tea.
Save it for your review. Save it for the review. Don't give away too much. Really quick, Hunter, we didn't get to talk about this enough. Let's talk a little bit about the trivia, because people love the trivia. You got a couple on there that's real fun.
Yeah.
Including, I noticed this too. Nicolas Cage's haircut. I noticed this, and I'm glad you put it in there.
Yes, I was going to say, if you go to watch this movie, if you've never seen it, very rarely I think do people listen to these shows and have not seen the movie.
Sure.
If you're doing that, it's not always a great idea. But this is even something that upon multiple rewatches, I never really paid that much attention to. It was Ethan Coen specifically who said that both Nicolas Cage both loved the Woody Woodpecker tattoo and the haircut as well, because the haircut is meant to kind of evoke that character. It reacts to his stress level throughout the movie, to HI's stress level. If you watch, anytime that he's in more danger or things are more heightened, the hair gets more ridiculous. It gets more. He just ran his fingers through it. It just gets like a bigger wave in it. You guys talked about Tex Cobb a little bit earlier. He surprisingly maybe was not familiar with motorcycles before they did this movie, despite the fact that he rides one exclusively through it, which makes me think maybe he had one of those interview or auditions like Christopher Walken did for Sleepy Hollow, where he's like, yeah, I can ride a horse. Then he gets the part and is like, okay, but how do you do it? Though?
But how do you do it? Yeah.
Because in the scene you were describing, when Smalls is supposed to ride his motorcycle up to the hole where the Gail and Emil got out of prison, when they did one take of that, he actually just went right into the hole. He didn't stop in time and just rode it straight in there.
So,
I didn't...
Really quick, I have two things on Tex Cobb I want to mention, because Tex Cobb is a strange story. He's an actor. He used to be a boxer. Yes. I have two pieces of trivia on him I want to mention.
If I remember correctly.
So the first thing is that I know he was a straight up boxer. I don't know about kickboxer. I know he was a boxer at one point. And the beat, this is from IMDb. I'm quoting them. I had heard about this, but I love their actual write up on this. The beating that Cobb took in his title fight versus heavyweight champ Larry Holmes, who was one of the greatest boxers of all time, so disgusted announcer Howard Cosell that Cosell reportedly never called a boxing match again. That's how bad Larry Holmes beat his ass. And then the other thing is, I love his quote on acting. He said, "I love acting. It's easy for me. All you have to do is look in the camera, smile, and lie with charm. I learned how to do that watching Don King promote fights." That is fucking great. That is awesome.
Yeah, so he was a full contact kickboxer 2 years before he went to professional boxing, and he did have a black belt in karate.
He's a tough guy.
He was also very young when he died. He died in 2001. He was only
50, probably 50ish.
No, I'm sorry. Hang on. He was active, and he was active as a boxer until 2001. He is not dead.
What?
He's still around. I misread that. He's 71. He was born in 53. I misread it. I thought that he apparently was like only 20-something years old, but that was his active career in boxing. Yeah.
Wow.
He's 71. He's born in 53. So he was not that old when they did this movie, frankly. And
also had a pretty diverse career. He did, I know he did The Golden Child, because I remember from that. He was in my favorite Police Academy, which is not a great film, but Citizens on Patrol, which is Police Academy 4. So yeah, really interesting career for Tex Cobb too. Yep. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
He although there's not really much more there. I didn't put it in here, but if you didn't pick up on it, his character's name Leonard Smalls. That's Lenny Smalls. He's named the same as one of the main characters from Of Mice and Men.
Of which they could never do with Muppets, as we said earlier.
Yeah, Lenny Smalls is the character Malkovich plays in the 1992 movie where he's mentally handicapped, and anyway, it's a whole thing. Yeah. There were 15 babies hired to play the Arizona Quints. One of them was fired over the course of the film. Well, they had to have at least 5, so you get 3 for each one, right? Right. They did have to fire one because he learned to walk. He learned to walk, and they had to get rid of him. That was funny. It was too much. And this was just goofy, but if you notice, if you another look closely thing, during the chase scene when they're in the supermarket, once High gets in there, every single person shopping is a woman with curlers in her hair.
I absolutely noticed
they exclusively stocked that market with those people.
Yeah, because when I saw that, I thought they all look like my mom late at night. And that's accurate for that time period.
I didn't put it on here, but another just note, not for the something that happens in the movie, but this is one of the biggest influences on one of my favorite comedy duos, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Yeah. Both specifically said this was the movie that made them want to make movies, that made them think we got to make something that's funny like this. So apparently they regularly revisit it and they reference it a lot in their like talks and stuff about their influences, I guess I should say.
Here's hoping one of these days they can make a comedy. All right. Well.
Oh
no, I kid. I kid. I liked Shaun of the Dead. I have not seen Hot Fuzz, and I thought At World's End was okay. I need to watch Hot Fuzz.
At World's End is not their best effort. Hot Fuzz is probably their best movie.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Let's get to the reviews. So on this show, of course, we use a 5-point system. 2 thumbs up means you absolutely love it. 1 thumb up means you like it. 1 up, 1 down means you're indifferent or you're neutral on it. 1 down means you didn't like it. 2 down means you hated it. Very few films have gotten the 2 thumbs down treatment. More than that have gotten the 2 thumbs up treatment, including last week's episode of A Christmas Carol, which wasn't last week. It was a couple days ago. I really got to pay attention.
Yes. It's okay.
Damn you, Taylor, for getting me lifted.
Well, it also doesn't feel like a couple of days ago because
it feels like a week ago at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll go first because Kaz is here, and I'm going to say it up front. It's a 1 thumb up for me. It's not 2 thumbs up because I do think there is some stuff in the film. I don't think the scenes went on too long. I don't agree with that, but some of it did seem stretched out. Some of it seemed a little unnecessary. Some of it seemed a little too, I don't know the right term for it. It felt a little too whimsical without explanation. The whole character of Tex Cobb is an anomaly in this film. It's like he's from a different movie, which is both good and bad in some ways. However, with that said, I think that, again, they don't make comedies like this anymore. They don't make comedies that feel naturally funny as opposed to, I always go back to, I think it's American Wedding or one of the American Pie sequels where there's a part where a guy like eats shit and everyone has a laugh because he eats shit. That is such stupid comedy. And sometimes you do get a laugh out of it, don't get me wrong. But this movie's not that. This movie, when I think of mature comedies, the Coen brothers are almost at the top of the list. It's funny without being, like in your face and over the top. I've said it like 3 times during the show. And this movie is a great representation of that. I also think this is probably, even though this isn't my favorite Nick Cage film, I think this is his best performance. He's, I only say that with the caveat of you need to watch Leaving Las Vegas because that is a fantastic movie and he's fantastic in it. But other than Leaving Las Vegas, this is the only other Nick Cage movie I've seen where he felt like a real person and not like Nick Cage. So you got to give him bonus points for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Holly Hunter once again, who's so good. I think she's the best part of this film. And she has also had such a great career with stuff that I didn't even remember. Zach mentioned it earlier. She's Elastigirl. I forgot she was Elastigirl. Yeah. She has such a great career. And
the moment they're in the car and she busts out crying out of nowhere, just saying, I love him so much, ruins me every time. It's so fucking funny. Because the way Nick Cage reacts to it, too, is just like looking over from the steering wheel, like, what the hell just happened?
The part where she starts calling him a son of a bitch, that is going to stick in my head for a couple of days. And even though clearly it's a movie, so she was never in any danger, but when she walks just straight up to Leonard Smalls and says, I want that baby, and just snatches him.
Give me that baby, you warthog from hell.
Fearless.
She's so good. I didn't put it in the trivia, but the rumor was that she improvised that insult, that they gave her something to say and she said something different. So that's why you hear further editing in the movie, like sound editing. Anytime that he makes a sound without speaking, they used sounds from a warthog. Notably, right before he explodes.
Yep.
And when he first he grunts at her when he's driving the motorcycle at her,
yeah.
They used actual warthog sounds because they just thought it was funny. They're like, that's a pretty good, accurate description of him.
And it is funny, and she's fantastic at this. She's the best part of it, other than Nick Cage. It's rare for me to find a comedy or a movie in general where the best parts are the leading characters. Almost always the best characters are a side character or, a supporting character that steals the show. Yeah. Not in this one. In this one, it's absolutely Nick Cage and Holly Hunter. They are the stars, and they do the bulk of the work. John Goodman is great, but I don't think he's quite hit his stride as John Goodman yet. William Forsythe is good, but very underutilized in this film because it's John Goodman. How do you compare to that? But overall,
right.
I do very much recommend this film. Even though I didn't give it 2 thumbs up, it's a strong thumbs up, and I do think this is well worth seeking out if you've never seen it before. Nick Cage is at top form here. Holly Hunter is great. The comedy is subtle, but it's funny. I was never bored, although I did kind of fall asleep once or twice because I'm so exhausted. It's not because of the film. I liked it a lot. I really did. It's not my favorite film of the year. I think that would still probably be Election. But it was really good. I love that. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Hunter, what about you?
This is probably not a terrible surprise that this movie's going to get 2 thumbs up from me. Yeah. I'm going to try really hard to be objective about this, but that's so difficult with something that's so intrinsically tied to, I can remember the way that my parents' living room smelled when I was watching this movie, sitting in front of the TV. So trying to extract myself from that, I still think this is maybe the Coen brothers' best movie. I know people love The Big Lebowski, and I get why it's extremely well made. But I don't have a love for that movie the way that I do for this one. I was picking back over the Roger Ebert review a minute ago, just out of curiosity, and he says at one point in time, the movie cannot decide if it exists in the real world of trailer parks and 7-Elevens and Pampers or in a fantasy world of characters from another dimension. It cannot decide if it is about real people or comic exaggerations, and I just don't think it's that exaggerated. I mean, yes, there are some silly moments, but I think they work. I think they tie directly into the way that the characters play out. He had a complaint about the fact that the speech patterns of the characters, they use phrases like "in as much" and they sound like they're Shakespearean type characters. He says, I just don't think you expect that from a 2-bit thief who lives in an Arizona trailer park. That's why it works. That's why it's funny. That's why it's interesting. That's why he feels like a real person. Because if he had just exclusively talked like a yokel, it would have
been
felt flat. Yeah, and not interesting. That's a one-dimensional character.
So, really quick, there's a part where John Goodman's character says something like so many social engagements, so little time. And that's one of the scenes where it kind of plays against who he is as a character. It seems like something too intelligent for him to really say or quote, but it doesn't seem out of place.
But it works because you know who the people are underneath that. In that same vein, Goodman at one point in time when they're trying to convince Hy to come on this little raid of the LaGrange bank with them, he gets up and he says, I know that you've got your ways, but the sun don't rise and set on the corner grocery. And it's just, again, there's these little quotable moments that are just...
Oh, Hunter.
Stick with me after the fact, yeah.
You know what it reminds me of, in a way? Bill and Ted. When Bill and Ted would say things like, "There's something's afoul at the Circle K," it's something you don't expect the characters to say, but it's not out of their... it doesn't feel unnatural.
Right. I think I said this when we reviewed the sequel, when we did Bogus Journey, that one of the things I wanted more of from them was that they're not actually idiots, that they're smarter than they come across. It's just that they're high intelligence, low wisdom.
Right.
And that's what Hy is, too. And they do a lot of that in the second Bill and Ted. I gave him a lot of credit for that because I enjoyed that movie a lot more.
Right.
This, to me, is the same kind of thing. He's not stupid. He just makes a lot of really stupid decisions. Because high intelligence, low wisdom. He's capable in the moment. He's just not good at doing anything in the world with it.
Right.
There's another version of me somewhere in the multiverse that would complain about this movie being very exposition heavy at the beginning, but this is one of the few times I think that really works too. They tell the story of the characters leading up to the intro and the title screen and the big wipe and all that, And it just, I don't know, man. This movie has no wasted motion for me. It is top to bottom. It tells you the story it wants to tell. It does it in an effective way. It has engaging, fun characters. It's funny. It's fun to watch. I never felt like it went on too long. Again, I'll never understand that criticism. It was one of the few times that I just didn't get Roger Ebert's problem with it. I love this movie. And I can watch this movie any time of the year with anybody.
Boy, that opening, and I agree with you, by the way. I probably would not sit down and watch every second of it, but if it was on, this is one of those films that I like enough that if it's on, I'm never going to change it. If it's on, it's on. Let's watch it.
I think I said this before
long. And not in a bad way, but when the credits finally rolled and it did that Raising Arizona part, right? I thought, oh god, we're like 20 minutes into the show, man. What are you doing?
Yes. Yeah, they give you all the exposition of those characters leading up to it with high narrating it, and I love that. Nicolas Cage is so good at that, and just summarizing what's happening. I think, just to wrap up my review, I think I said this yesterday, there are a lot of movies that I can quote well. I remember movies and song lyrics and that kind of stuff really well for whatever reason. This is one of the movies where, frankly, I think I'd be annoying around somebody who had not seen it before, because I found myself yesterday annoying myself. I knew what was coming next. I think I know this movie better than I know Ghostbusters, and I fucking love Ghostbusters. There's no question about that. Right. But this movie, I think I could practically quote in my sleep, and I only see it maybe once or twice a year at this point. I just think it's really well written. It's incredibly well shot. It's super funny. Comedy's subjective, but this is my mark. This is my high water mark for comedy.
Okay, no pressure, but now we're going to throw it over to Zach Kurgis to follow up both of those reviews. Zach?
I'm really torn.
I can see the nervousness on his face. Zach, you just be yourself, man. No hate here.
I was going to say, man, it's, you got to do what you got to do.
I think I'm going to do one thumb up, one thumb down. I think I'm going to be neutral in the sense of, this definitely isn't my cup of tea, and I did not like it. I thought it was kind of boring in parts. But I don't know. Like, I can't give you a reason why. I was watching it, and it felt, I don't know. To me, it felt like a chore to watch it. And I don't know.
Zach, not to interrupt you, I am curious, and this is a totally even keel question. You mentioned Oh Brother, Where Art Thou earlier, and I know you like that movie. Are there any other Coen Brothers movies that you watch regularly or enjoy?
Lebowski, right?
I like The Big Lebowski.
Okay.
Let me see what else they got.
I was just curious. I would have thought
I think it's just Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and
Lebowski.
And The Big Lebowski, yeah.
I can see that. Yeah, I feel like those are kind of removed from this movie in a way. They have similar moments, but...
Admission, real quick. I've never seen The Big Lebowski.
Oh.
Yeah.
We should do that for this show. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I've seen it several times, but...
It's pretty fun.
Oh, the dude abides.
Here, Mr. Lebowski. But no, it's just, I see why people enjoy this movie. Like, the film itself is a beautiful thing. I think, like I was talking to Shannon when you were gone, I love the way it's filmed and all the shots and the cinematography and all that, but it just wasn't for me, so I'm going to go neutral because I feel like this is some people's cup of tea. Like,
dude,
this is definitely your guys' cup of tea.
Well, not mine particularly. This sounds exactly like my review of A Christmas Story. Because it's, again, I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. It just wasn't for me, and that's exactly what I said on A Christmas Story. I also gave that one thumb up, one down, because I didn't want to take away from the fact that, like, clearly I see it's a good film. It didn't reach me like it reaches others. So I feel you on this one. I get you on this one.
That's kind of where I am. Like, and I watched it twice. Because the first time it was going to get 2 thumbs down.
Yeah, I told Hunter about that. You were in a bad
I was really worried to come on here, like, because I listened to that show, and I was kind of like, when Shannon was like, well, maybe he shouldn't come, I was like, okay. And then you were like, no, he shouldn't, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that.
It's all subjective, man. We try to be as objective as we can, but there's always going to be some personal preference. Otherwise, why would we have multiple people reviewing a movie?
Exactly.
It wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly. There's always going to be a film like this or like other films with small creatures that we don't talk about. That is going to be divisive.
Love that movie.
Well, we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about this movie.
Besides that, I will say, because the first time I watched it, I don't know why, I think I was just in a weird funk, and I really did hate it. But watching it again, like I said, I didn't hate it this time. To me, like I said, it was kind of boring, kind of felt like a chore in a sense, but not in the way of like, I need to do this. It was just kind of like I was trying to, I don't know.
It was
I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, but I'm now neutral on it.
My belief is that if he watches it again for a third time, 1 thumb up. It increases as it goes along.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think it gets better the more you know what you're getting into.
I'm waiting for the one movie Hunter loves that I'll hate just to get him back. But this ain't it.
My biggest problem with it is when Nick Cage gets dragged by that guy. And after that whole fight, nothing's wrong with this shirt, nothing's wrong with that, nothing. And then at the end, he just has a Band-Aid here and a Band-Aid here.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that because
cartoony.
It's a little thing I loved, but I love the fact that when he pulled the pins on the grenade, it wasn't an action hero like, I beat the bad guy. He says, I'm sorry, because he didn't want to kill him. I like that a lot. He just had to protect his family. Exactly.
He also just threw himself in between the two of them. There was never, I'm going to win. I just got to stop him long enough for them to get away.
I will say, I know we haven't really talked about the ending, but I will say the whole ending speech thing, I think that really also is another reason why I gave it one at least neutral status, is because I really like the speech that they get at the end, and then I like how it ends.
Which speech are you talking about? Are you talking about the dream sequence or the Nathan Arizona speech?
Nathan Arizona, when he's talking to him, he's like, just take care of each other, even if it don't work. Yeah.
Dude, this is gonna, oh my god, this is admitting too much, but Lindsay and I watched it together, and when he's doing that speech, I start to get teary-eyed and I look over at her, and I'm like, oh dear god, it is such a good speech. I loved the ending, because Nathan Arizona is presented as such a, kind of, not a dirtbag, but you kind of think he doesn't care about his kids through the movie, right?
Right.
But at the end, the human side of him that he shows as he's telling them about that, and when he says, "Well, you brought him back, maybe there's some good to you too," that was so good. That was outstanding. I loved that part. For the record.
Yes.
Let's get
Coen
to the
brothers know they know a good monologue. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, they're extremely talented. Much better than the Wachowskis. They just did The Matrix, basically. Okay, anyway, the ending. Hi and Ed sneak back into the Arizona home to return Nathan Jr., but Nathan Sr. catches them. He sympathizes with their motives and decides not to report them to the authorities, as we talked about with the speech just a second ago. Learning that Hi and Ed are considering a divorce, he suggests that they think about it first. While sleeping beside Ed that night, Hi has a series of prophetic dreams. Gail and is it Evil or Evel? I forget. Evel.
It's Evil, yeah.
Return to prison, having realized that they are not ready for society, which they're brothers, right? That's what I got from that?
Yeah, they're Gail and Evil Snotes. They have the same last name. They're as fine a pair as ever broken air.
I do like them a lot. Glenn is arrested by a Polish-American police officer who is unamused by the ethnic jokes he tells, which is also one of my favorite parts. And Nathan Jr. becomes a high school football star with Hi and Ed anonymously watching and encouraging him. Later, he dreams of an elderly couple with a large, wholesome family and wonders whether this was a vision of him and Ed. And I hope it is. This is one of the few films. I don't have anything to add to this, by the way. I don't have a sequel to set up. I really don't even have an examination of the characters themselves to tell you what they could go through after this. There are very few times in a movie where I genuinely want a happy ending, and I wanted it for this. I wanted it for Ed and Hi. I want them to stay together. I want them to be in love, and I hope that's what it was, because I think that's the best ending. It's hard to find someone in life that you can go through life with it's even harder to find someone that will stick with you when you make such stupid decisions as this. And even though I've never made stupid decisions quite as bad as robbing a Quickie Mart basically 4 times in a row, I've made some pretty dumbass decisions in my life, and Lindsay has stood by me through all of them. So this ending got to be a little bit, I ain't gonna lie. This ending, even more so than Oh Brother Where Art Thou, because I love Oh Brother Where Art Thou. I love the ending. The ending to this film is so sympathetic and sweet that all I wanted was for them to be happy together. And that's all I have to add. I don't care if they ever go back to the characters again. I just wanted them to have a happy ending. That's all I wanted. So I really hope that that's what it was. Hunter, what about you? What do you got to add?
Yeah, I definitely don't want a sequel. I don't want to follow up. I don't need a follow up. This is a very strongly self-contained story. There's no series to be had here. There's no. Yeah, I guess you could remake it, but I don't know why. You're not going to get a better version of this than that.
Yeah. Please don't touch this film. Oh, God.
I understand that the Coen brothers did something with Fargo, making it into a television series, and basically just retelling the movie as a series. Maybe there's some version of that exists here, but I just don't think so.
But which actors?
This is a really strongly told story.
Which actors do you get to replicate Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter? It's almost impossible.
I was going to say Cage for sure. He's just not. He's a force unto himself. You're not going to get somebody to just step into that role and make it work again. They'd be doing a caricature. They'd be doing an impression, right? It wouldn't work that way.
Right.
And yeah, the movie does a really good job of telling its own sort of epilogue. Yes, it's told as a dream, and like you said, I really hope that that's essentially the way that it plays out, and it goes much further in the future than anybody expects. But yeah, I hate to kind of wimp out, I think, a couple times in a row now on being like, oh, here's what happens, and not having something to go with. But the movie does it. The movie does it for you. The follow-up needs to be exactly what was shown there, because we're presented multiple options, right? Ed thinks they should split up. High, of course, doesn't, and neither does Nathan, and he kind of imparts that upon them. And High's dream, while it might be kind of pie in the sky, I think it also is not unrealistic, right? No. I mean, he doesn't go in on, and then we got him back. That's not the point. The point at the end of it is that they're happy with who they are, and again, maybe one day they are able to have their own kids.
The science catches up to them.
I sort of right. You got to hope medical science gets there. I just love that the movie does a good job of wrapping it up in that way. I remember when I was younger, I didn't appreciate this ending, by the way. Obviously, I wanted it to be silly and over the top, and it took time to go from being, 12 to 39 and watching it now and actually appreciating what it does there.
Holy shit. So. You don't think about it a lot, but the way you see things and the way you process things are legitimately so different when you're a kid versus when you're 39. We talked about it with, what was the movie recently we watched where it was Krampus. Originally, when I saw Krampus, I was like, I wanted the dark ending where they're trapped in limbo forever. But as I get older, I'm like, no, I kind of like the ending where they get to reunite and they're being watched, because not everything has to be dark and edgy or whatever. In a film like Terrifier, yes, that's what you want, because that's what you're going there for. I'm throwing it in for Zach because he's got the Terrifier tumbler right there. But sometimes it's okay to have a happy ending. And legitimately, we could do a show one day on why Hollywood, especially horror films now, think that you don't have to have a happy ending, that the dark ending is the best. That's not always true. Sometimes it's okay to be okay. You know what I mean?
Yes.
All right. Well, I've drunkenly rambled quite a bit. Zach, do you have anything to add to this, or can we wrap this up?
I will say, if like the dream sequence or whatever is happening at the end is like the future that he's seen or whatever, I appreciate, since Hunter was saying that throughout the movie, his hair is like kind of how he is.
Wild.
And in that last shot when they're going back, his hair is just perfectly down and it looks like he's at peace. Like, he found who he was, and he's not like wild haired, like crazy. He's probably not a con anymore. And,
Well,
he might be.
Yeah.
He might be still trying that same gas station.
He's still robbing that same gas station over and over again.
Every now and then.
He ain't too good. You can see it in his eyes. He got a little outlaw in him.
At this point, they know. They just go with it. They got some play money. By that time, he's that age. They got play money for him and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up tonight's show. We have one more Cagey Christmas episode. We're going to review National Treasure with Tanner. That's coming soon. And that's actually going to do it for us for 2024.
Yeah.
Then it's on to...
That'll be our last show. I believe that's coming Monday.
Yeah. And then it's on to 2025. Hunter, what's our gimmick for 2025? I forget, actually.
For extras and epilogues, we begin the year with James Bond in January.
Yes!
So we're back to our 1 week format for the first time in 4 months. We had a lot of things to do in October, November, and December, but we're gonna bring it back down a bit. We do have 5 shows in January. We're back on our Wednesdays, our regular Wednesday shows. But there are 5 of them. And so Cody helped us work up a nice little list of maybe the most important James Bond movies. So we're going to do them sequentially. We're starting with Sean Connery, working our way all the way to Daniel Craig.
I only had one requirement, and I knew it was going to be the one anyway, but we had to do GoldenEye. Because I still think GoldenEye is the best James Bond film ever. I stand by it, but we'll see.
It's definitely Brosnan's best.
Oh, 100%.
I think without question, it's his best.
We'll see if it's still the best after watching all of them again. Because it's been a while since I've seen them. I have the entire collection. Like I have the collection physically because I love James Bond.
I don't know if I've said it here. I know I've talked about it, but I have never seen anything before Pierce Brosnan. I've only seen Brosnan's and Craig's movies, and I've seen all of them. But anything before them, never seen it. So Connery, Moore, Dalton, I think are the 3. I think we left out Lazenby, if I remember correctly.
We're gonna call this Cody January because it's gonna be on every episode.
He's definitely going to be on a handful of them. I would like to get Asa in here too. I know that Asa really likes James Bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think we should definitely have those guys around for these things.
Yeah.
So that's coming up there, and then we'll talk about the rest of the year after that. We actually technically currently have a plan for the rest of the year, but I don't want to inundate the people with too much. Let's just say we have some new things coming this year, which we're very excited about. We're not going to do all the same themes from last year. We are bringing back a lot of your favorites, but.
You might say, Shannon, you said you're ending the podcast in March. How can you have a whole year's of episodes? Well, the truth is, even if we end Podzilla as a whole, this show will carry on.
This will continue.
Yeah, because this is something we all really enjoy doing. It's something I've always wanted to do. So this is my pride and joy of the network right now. But we'll see what happens.
Just to give them a couple of previews of new things, we are planning a musical month. We are planning a video game month. We got a whole month dedicated to Mel Brooks, so that's going to be very cool.
I'm excited for sequel September, and you know why?
It's coming back, yes.
Because Gremlins 2. Damn it!
He knew he couldn't go the whole show. I have it on the list as an option. I have it on there as a thing that we could do.
I'm so curious to hear about it.
I will not be upset or surprised if we do.
Yes.
The only thing is I'll have to watch it again because it's now been over a year.
I'll come watch it with you just so we still have fun with it.
You own it. It's okay.
All right, that's going to do it for us tonight. We'll be out of here. We'll see you guys for National Treasure, and then we'll see you in 2025. Damn you, Taylor. Thank you to Zach for showing up on the show and being as respectful as possible and not mentioning Gremlins. Thank you for Hunter, of course. We love you guys. We'll see you next time. And until then, Hunter, please take us out.
800 leaf tables and no chairs. You can't sell leaf tables and no chairs. Chairs, you got a dinette set. No chairs, you got dick.